Frank Miller yawned as he walked the empty halls of the Pine Ridge Research Center. The clock on the wall read 2:17 a.m. 5 more hours until his shift ended. The facility sat in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by Montana's vast forests and mountains. Most nights nothing happened. Frank liked it that way. Tonight felt different. Frank couldn't explain why, but something in the air made the hair on his neck stand up. He tapped the flashlight against his palm and continued his rounds. Frank had worked security here for 3 years since leaving the military. His boss valued his background as a special forces operative, though Frank never talked about those days. The quiet nights gave him time to think, to plan his future. Maybe he'd finally use his savings to buy that cabin by the lake. As Frank passed the east windows, a flash of blue light caught his eye. He stopped and looked out. The night sky had been clear earlier, no storms in the forecast. The light flashed again, brighter this time. "What the hell?" Frank muttered. He pressed his face against the glass. The light now hovered above the tree line, pulsing with strange colors he couldn't name. Frank radioed the main desk. "Joe, you seeing this on the cameras? Something weird in the east sky." Static answered him. Frank tried again. Nothing. "Great," he said. The radio had been acting up all week. Frank decided to check outside. Protocol said to stay put, but his curiosity won out. He'd just take a quick look. The night air felt cool on Frank's face as he stepped outside. The strange light grew larger, casting eerie shadows across the facility grounds. Frank shielded his eyes. This was no aircraft he recognized, and he'd seen plenty during his military days. The light suddenly intensified, becoming a beam that shot down directly at Frank. He tried to move but couldn't. His feet felt stuck to the ground as the light wrapped around him. "Not good," Frank said calmly, even as his body began to rise from the ground. The research center shrank below him as he floated upward into the belly of what he now could see was a massive ship. Frank didn't panic. Panic killed. Instead, he focused on his breathing and observed everything. The beam pulled him into a circular opening, then deposited him gently onto a metallic floor. The air smelled strange, like ozone, and something sweet he couldn't identify. A clear tube descended around him, sealing him in. Frank tapped the material. It felt stronger than glass, but somehow flexible. He looked around at the curved walls covered in pulsing symbols and screens showing what looked like star charts. 3 figures entered the room. Frank stared at his captors. They stood taller than humans, with slim bodies and 4 arms each. Their skin shimmered with a bluish tint, and their large eyes took up most of their oval faces. They wore what looked like jumpsuits covered in devices and blinking lights. The tallest one approached the tube. It made clicking sounds to the others, who responded with musical tones. Frank realized they were talking about him. He stood straight, shoulders back, face neutral. He'd been in worse situations. Much worse. One of the creatures pressed something on the wall. A voice filled the tube, speaking perfect English with an odd accent. Human specimen secured. Vitals normal. Fear response lower than predicted. Frank almost smiled at that. These things, whatever they were, expected him to be scared. The tall one spoke directly to Frank now, its words translated through some unseen device. "Welcome aboard the Star Cruiser, joke's on you. I am Kest, captain of Mischief for the Zorbian Entertainment Fleet. You have been selected for our most popular program across 17 star systems." Frank raised an eyebrow. "What program is that?" The alien made a sound like bells tinkling. Frank guessed it was laughter. "Primitive Panic, of course, where we place beings from developing worlds into challenging scenarios for our viewers' amusement. You should feel honored." Frank looked around the tube, already noting possible weaknesses in the design, cataloging the layout of the room, watching how the aliens moved. He'd been trained to observe, to plan, to survive. "And if I don't want to participate?" Frank asked. All 3 aliens made the bell sound now. "That's what makes it entertaining," Kist said. "The panic, the pleading, the primitive responses to advanced situations. Our viewers will love you. Frank stayed silent, his mind already working on how to turn this situation to his advantage. The aliens had no idea what they'd just brought aboard their ship. Frank studied the three aliens as they moved around the room. They seemed excited, chattering in their strange language when not using the translator for his benefit. Their skin changed colors slightly as they spoke, shifting from blue to purple tones. "Allow me to introduce my crew," Kest said, gesturing with his upper arms while his lower ones operated the floating control panel. "This is Blip, our biology specialist." He pointed to the smallest alien, who had markings around its neck that glowed green. Blip stepped forward and peered at Frank through the clear tube. "Fascinating specimen. Much calmer than our research indicated. Perhaps defective." The alien's voice sounded higher-pitched through the translator. "And this is Furs, our show producer." Kest indicated the third alien, who wore what looked like jewelry on all four arms. Furs made a gesture that might have been a wave. "Our viewers are already placing bets on how quickly you'll break down. The odds favor under 1 Earth hour." Frank kept his face neutral. "Sorry to disappoint your audience." The aliens made their bell-like laughing sound again. "It speaks with humor," Furs exclaimed. "The ratings will be stellar." Kest approached the tube and pressed his hand against it. "Human, we have studied your species for quite some time. Your entertainment broadcasts show how easily frightened you are. Darkness, heights, confined spaces, other Earth creatures. You fear so many things." Frank shrugged. "Some of us do." Blip tilted his head. "Our data indicates humans are soft, fragile beings who require constant comfort and safety." "Your data might need updating," Frank said. The tube suddenly lifted, and Frank felt a slight change in the air pressure. He remained still, hands relaxed at his sides, watching as Furs approached with what looked like a floating camera. "We will now give our specimen a tour of the facilities where it will be staying and performing," Furs announced, apparently broadcasting to their audience. Frank followed as Kist motioned him forward. The ship's corridors curved in strange ways, with no sharp corners. The walls pulsed with soft light that changed color as they walked. Frank counted steps, noted junctions, and memorized the pattern of symbols at each doorway, old habits from his military days. They arrived at a large circular room filled with various chambers and equipment. Some looked like simulators, others like medical devices. Frank recognized nothing specifically, but he understood their general purpose: testing and observation. "This is our entertainment lab," Kest explained proudly. "Here we create scenarios designed to trigger your species' fear responses. We can simulate any environment from your world, plus many you've never imagined." "Impressive," Frank said, genuinely meaning it. The technology was far beyond anything he'd seen. Blip approached with a device that hovered at eye level. "We must scan your brain patterns to calibrate our fear inducers properly." Frank allowed the scan, keeping his breathing steady and his mind clear. Years of training under extreme stress had taught him to control his responses. "Most unusual," Blip said, studying the results. "Very minimal amygdala activation. Perhaps the specimen is damaged." "I'm not damaged," Frank said, "just experienced." Furs floated closer with the camera. "Tell us, human, what is your name and function on your world?" "Frank Miller. I'm a security guard." "Security guard," Kest repeated, his skin flashing with colors. "One who protects." Frank nodded. "Something like that." The aliens conferred among themselves, making clicking and humming sounds. "This explains the reduced fear response," Blip finally said. "This human's function requires confronting danger. Still, the baseline for human courage is quite low. Our challenges will still prove effective." They led Frank to a smaller room with a bed-like platform and what he guessed were food and water dispensers. "Your resting chamber," Kist explained. "We will begin the first entertainment segment after 1 Earth hour." Please use this time to increase your anxiety levels for better viewer experience. The aliens left, a transparent barrier appearing across the doorway as they exited. Frank sat on the edge of the platform, looking around the room carefully. He noticed small details, the air circulation vents, the nearly invisible seams in the walls, the pattern of the energy field at the door. His mind was already working, analyzing, planning. These aliens had no idea what humans were truly capable of, especially humans like Frank, who had been trained to turn any situation to their advantage. He smiled slightly. This might actually be fun. Frank woke to a loud buzzing sound. The lights in his room pulsed blue to green and back again. He had used his rest time well, doing push-ups and stretches to keep his body ready. Now he stood, alert and waiting. The transparent barrier disappeared, and Kist entered with Vers and two new aliens Frank hadn't seen before. These wore different outfits with what looked like armor pieces on their upper arms. "Good cycle, human Frank," Kist said cheerfully. "Our audience is quite eager for your first challenge." Frank nodded. "What did you have in mind?" Vers floated forward with the camera device. "Our research shows humans fear being hunted by predators and becoming lost in unfamiliar territory. We have combined these elements for maximum entertainment value." One of the new aliens stepped forward and placed a small disc on Frank's wrist. It attached itself firmly, showing numbers and symbols Frank couldn't read. "This will monitor your vital signs and stress levels," Blip's voice said from somewhere overhead. "It also tracks your location within the challenge environment." Frank examined the device. "And if I try to remove it?" The aliens made their tinkling laugh sound. "It would cause significant discomfort," Kest said, "but you will not need to remove it. The challenge lasts only 1 Earth hour." They led Frank down another curved hallway to a large doorway. Behind it, Frank could see what looked like a dense forest with tall trees and thick undergrowth. "This is a simulation based on Earth environments," Kest explained, "though we have made some improvements to increase the fear factor." Frank looked at the forest with interest. "What's the goal?" "Survive," Vers said simply. "Reach the exit point before time expires, or before the predators catch you." "What predators?" Frank asked. As if answering his question, a deep roar echoed from within the forest. It sounded like nothing Frank had heard on Earth, a mix between a tiger and something much larger. "Modified versions of Earth's most efficient hunters," Blip explained, suddenly appearing on a screen on the wall. "Enhanced for speed and tracking ability." Frank took a deep breath and rolled his shoulders. "Any weapons or tools available?" The aliens looked at each other in surprise. "Tools?" Kest asked. No. The point is to run and hide." Frank smiled slightly. "Right." A countdown appeared on the wall in alien symbols, but Frank understood the meaning. When it reached what he assumed was 0, the door fully opened. "Begin," Vers announced dramatically. Frank walked calmly into the forest, not running, not panicking, just walking and observing. He heard the aliens murmuring in confusion behind him. Once inside, the environment felt remarkably real. The ground was soft under his feet, the air humid and filled with forest smells. Frank quickly identified several plant types that looked almost like Earth species, but with subtle differences, brighter colors, different leaf patterns. He moved deeper into the forest, keeping his footsteps light and his senses alert. Within minutes, he heard movement to his left, something large moving through the underbrush. Frank didn't run. Instead, he picked up a thick fallen branch and broke off the smaller twigs, creating a makeshift staff. "The human is making a tool," he heard Blip's voice say from somewhere above. "Fascinating but futile against our hunters." Frank ignored the commentary and continued assessing his surroundings. He found a tree with low branches and climbed up about 15 feet, gaining a better view of the landscape. In the distance, he could see what appeared to be a clearing with some kind of structure, likely the exit point. He also spotted movement, 3 large creatures prowling through the forest. They resembled tigers but with 6 legs and ridged backs. Their fur shifted colors slightly as they moved, blending with their surroundings. Adaptive camouflage. Frank muttered to himself. Interesting. Rather than heading directly for the exit, Frank climbed down and began gathering materials: vines, rocks, more branches. He worked quickly and methodically, constructing simple but effective traps around his position. "What is the specimen doing?" Frank heard Kist ask. This behavior was not in our human survival profiles. "It appears to be setting traps," Blip replied, sounding confused. "But our data indicates humans typically respond with flight, not fight." Frank smiled as he finished his preparations. Then he deliberately broke a branch loudly. The nearest hunter creature turned its head sharply and began moving toward him. "Now," Frank whispered, "let's show these aliens what humans can really do." The 6-legged hunter creature moved toward Frank with surprising speed. Its muscles rippled under color-shifting fur as it stalked forward. Frank stood his ground, staff held firmly in both hands. At the last moment, he stepped aside, leading the creature directly into his first trap. The hunter's front legs broke through the carefully covered pit. It roared in anger as it stumbled, momentarily trapped. Frank didn't waste the opportunity. He struck the creature hard across its back with his staff, then quickly retreated to his next position. "The human is fighting back," Blip's voice announced, sounding both surprised and interested. "This contradicts our research data." Frank heard excited chatter from the alien observers, but kept his focus on the task. The 2nd and 3rd hunter creatures were now approaching, drawn by the first one's roars of pain and anger. Frank led them through a series of traps: trip lines made from vines, falling branch arrangements, and stone piles positioned to create noise and confusion. He never engaged directly for more than a quick strike before moving to new cover. "Remarkable strategy," Kist commented. "The human uses the environment instead of raw strength." After disabling 2 of the hunters, Frank made his way toward the exit point. The remaining creature followed, more cautious now. Frank could see the exit clearly, a glowing doorway at the edge of the clearing. As he approached, the ground began to shake. The environment changed rapidly. The forest melted away, replaced by a rocky landscape with active volcanoes in the distance. The air became hot and filled with smoke. "We are increasing the challenge level," Vers announced. "Let us see how the human handles environmental hazards." Frank paused, reassessing his situation. The hunter creature seemed confused by the sudden change, but was still tracking him. The exit now sat atop a steep cliff with bubbling lava pools below. "Really?" Frank muttered. "Lava?" He searched the area and found several long, flat rocks. Working quickly, he created a makeshift shield and a lever system. When the hunter creature charged again, Frank used the lever to send a shower of smaller rocks down on it, then raced toward the cliff. The path was narrow and crumbling. Frank moved carefully but steadily. Behind him, the hunter had recovered and was following. "Heart rate still within normal parameters," Blip reported, sounding disappointed. "No significant fear response detected." Frank reached a gap in the path. It was too wide to jump safely with the unstable ground. The hunter creature was closing in. "Now we will see panic," Kest said confidently. Instead, Frank used his staff to vault across the gap, landing solidly on the other side. The hunter tried to follow but couldn't make the jump with its heavier body. It fell into the lava below with a horrible shriek. Frank continued to the exit, reaching it with several minutes left on the timer. As he stepped through, the environment dissolved around him, and he found himself back in the ship's main testing chamber. The aliens stared at him in silence. "That was unexpected," Kest finally said. Frank set down his makeshift weapons. "Where I'm from, we adapt to survive." During the next rest period, Frank sat quietly in his room, appearing to relax. In reality, he was carefully examining everything around him. He noticed the aliens watched him through nearly invisible monitoring devices in the walls. He also noted how the ship's systems responded to the aliens' movements and voice commands. Most importantly, he observed that when the aliens spoke among themselves without using the translator, their skin colors shifted in patterns that seemed to match certain sounds. Frank began to recognize repeating patterns, possibly words or phrases in their language. When Blip entered to scan him after the challenge, Frank asked innocent-sounding questions. "Your ship is amazing. How do you power something this big?" Blip, pleased by the human's interest, explained their energy systems in simple terms. "And these walls, they look solid, but they're warm. What are they made of?" Again, the alien happily shared information, not realizing Frank was building a mental map of the ship's vulnerabilities. "One last question," Frank said casually. "Those hunter creatures, were they real or some kind of projection?" "A combination," Blip replied proudly. "Physical forms with adaptive programming. My own design." Frank nodded appreciatively. "Very impressive. I'm looking forward to the next challenge." Blip's skin flashed with pleased colors. "Rest well, human. Tomorrow's entertainment will be even more stimulating." After the alien left, Frank smiled slightly. The Zorbians had no idea they were giving him exactly what he needed: information, time, and severely underestimated capabilities. The real challenge, Frank thought, would be for them. 3 days passed, and Frank completed 5 more challenges. Each time, he surprised the aliens with his creative solutions and calm approach. The viewing audience across 17 star systems had doubled, then tripled. Everyone wanted to see the unusual human who refused to panic. Frank sat in his room after the latest challenge, an underwater maze filled with alien sea creatures. He had not only finished ahead of time, but had also tamed one of the smaller creatures to help him navigate. "Our ratings are at record levels," Frank overheard Vers telling the others. "But the audience expects escalation. They want to see the humans' breaking point." "I have designed the ultimate challenge," Kest responded. No human could remain calm in this scenario. Frank smiled slightly. While the aliens had been focused on testing him, he had been testing them, learning their routines, weaknesses, and technology. During each challenge, he collected small items and hid them in his clothes, a piece of the control panel that had broken off, wiring from a damaged section of the simulated environment, even a small tool dropped by a maintenance worker. Most importantly, Frank had noticed something interesting about the aliens themselves. When they were excited or stressed, their skin colors changed rapidly, and they made high-pitched sounds that seemed to cause them discomfort. They would cover their hearing organs and dim the lights until they calmed down. The door to his room opened, and all 3 main aliens entered. Kist looked especially pleased with himself. "Human Frank, you have proven most entertaining," Kist said. "But now we prepare for our season final, the ultimate test of human courage." Frank nodded politely. "I'm ready. Are you?" Vers asked, skin flashing with excitement. "This challenge is different. We have analyzed your species' deepest fears. Not physical dangers, but psychological ones." Blip stepped forward with a small device. "This will help us map your brain more accurately." Frank allowed them to place the device on his forehead. He felt a slight tingling sensation. "Perfect," Blip said after a moment. "We can now create a fully personalized fear environment based on your own mind." Frank was led to a new room, larger than the previous challenge chambers. The walls were plain white, with no features at all. "This is our most advanced simulation chamber," Kist explained. "Once it activates, you will experience your deepest fears made real. No human has ever remained calm in this environment." Frank looked around, noting the control panel near the doorway. "How long is this challenge?" "Until you signal surrender," Vers said. "But our data suggests most beings last less than 10 minutes. The aliens left the room. Frank heard Kist's voice from a speaker, beginning ultimate fear simulation in 30 seconds. Frank quickly went to work. He removed the small items he had collected and assembled them near the control panel. Using the broken piece of alien technology and wires, he created a simple but effective device, essentially a frequency generator. "Simulation beginning," announced Kest's voice. The white walls began to change, forming images from Frank's memories. Combat zones, fallen comrades, dark confined spaces. The aliens had indeed found elements that would disturb most humans, but Frank had faced his real fears long ago during his military service. As the simulation intensified, Frank completed his device. The room filled with images of everything the aliens thought would terrify him. Frank ignored them and moved to the control panel. "Subject shows elevated heart rate," he heard Blip say. Finally, a fear response. "Not fear," Frank said quietly. "Concentration." Frank attached his device to the control panel and activated it. Immediately, it began emitting a high-pitched sound at exactly the frequency he had observed, causing distress to the Zordians. Through the viewing window, he saw all three aliens clutch their hearing organs, their skin flashing wildly with distress colors. The simulation around Frank flickered and died as the aliens lost control of the systems. "What is happening?" Kest cried out, his voice distorted by pain. Frank calmly walked to the door, which had unlocked when the systems malfunctioned. He stepped out into the control room. "I believe," Frank said, picking up the translator device from the console, "that what's happening is a change in programming." The aliens backed away, still suffering from the sound. Frank adjusted the device, increasing its range. "Now," he said, "let's talk about who's really in charge of this ship." The three aliens huddled in the corner of the control room, their skin flickering between pale blue and sickly green. Frank adjusted his sound device, lowering the intensity just enough so they could speak. "You have damaged our ship's systems," Kist said, his voice weak. "This is not how the game is supposed to work." Frank walked calmly to the main control panel. "This stopped being a game when you took me against my will." He studied the alien controls. After days of careful observation, he understood the basic principles. The symbols were strange, but the functions were logical. Frank pressed several buttons, and screens lit up showing different parts of the ship. "Please," Blip pleaded, "you don't understand what you're doing. Those systems are very delicate." Frank glanced at him. "Then you should help me understand them better." Vers tried to stand but quickly sank back down when Frank raised the device. "The audience is still watching," Vers said. "This will make excellent entertainment. Turn off the broadcast," Frank ordered. When none of the aliens moved, Frank pressed what he believed was the communication control. The screens flickered, and the small floating cameras dropped to the floor, deactivated. "Now," Frank said, "show me how to control this ship." Under the threat of the sound device, Kest reluctantly approached the main console. "What do you want?" "First, I want to contact your homeworld." The aliens looked at each other in alarm. "That is not possible," Kest said. "We are not authorized to make direct contact with the High Council." Frank increased the sound slightly. All three aliens winced. "I think you'll find a way," Frank said. 30 minutes later, Frank stood before a large screen. On it appeared a new Zordian, older than the others, wearing elaborate decorations on all four arms. "I am Chief Administrator Kuzzle of the Zordian High Council," the alien said. "Who are you, and why have you taken control of an entertainment vessel?" Frank bowed slightly. "My name is Frank Miller. I'm a human from Earth. Your entertainment crew abducted me without consent to use in their show." The administrator's skin darkened. "Kest, is this true? You took a being from a non-contact world." Kest stepped forward, his skin pale with fear. The ratings were dropping. We needed something new and exciting. Frank interrupted. "I have a proposal, Administrator. I've learned quite a bit about your technology during my time here. I could share this information with my people when I return." "That would violate our non-interference protocols," Kuzzle said sharply. "Exactly," Frank replied. "So here are my terms. Return me to Earth, exactly when and where you took me. And in exchange, I'll keep quiet about your existence. You are in no position to make demands, the administrator said, though its skin colors showed uncertainty. Frank smiled. Actually, I am. I've accessed your ship's database. I understand how your propulsion systems work now. I've also figured out how to send an emergency signal that would be detectable by Earth's radio telescopes. This was only partly true, but Frank had learned that confidence was often as powerful as facts. The administrator's skin rippled with colors Frank hadn't seen before. You are bluffing. Am I? Frank pressed a series of buttons, bringing up the ship's communication array controls. Should we find out? The control room fell silent. Even Kist and the others watched with tense anticipation. Finally, the administrator spoke. What are your full terms, human? 3 things, Frank said. First, return me to Earth, with no missing time. Second, leave my planet alone. No more abductions for your entertainment. Third, any species you do interact with should give informed consent. You would have us change our entire entertainment industry based on your human moral code? Kezel asked. Frank nodded. Unless you want other species to do what I've done. Not everyone will be as restrained as I've been. The threat hung in the air. Frank could see the aliens processing his words, understanding the implications. What guarantees do we have that you will remain silent about us? The administrator asked. Frank considered this. I'll take a small piece of your technology as insurance. Nothing dangerous, just proof. If you keep your end of the deal, I'll keep mine. The administrator's skin finally settled into a calm blue. Very well, human Frank Miller. We have an agreement. Behind him, Frank heard Kist whisper to the others. Did we just get outsmarted by a primitive species? Frank smiled. The aliens were finally learning what humans were truly capable of. The next day, Frank stood in what the aliens called the return chamber. It looked similar to the area where he had first arrived on the ship. Hist, Blip, and Vers watched him with a mixture of fear and respect. Your world has been marked as protected in our databases, Kist said, his voice more formal than before. No Zorbian vessels will approach Earth for entertainment purposes. Frank nodded. And the other species you've been abducting? Blip stepped forward. The High Council has ordered a review of all our entertainment protocols. Future participants will be from worlds that have agreed to such interactions. Good, Frank said. He held up a small device the aliens had given him, a simple communication tool that would work only once. And remember, if you break our agreement, I'll use this. Vers's skin flickered with nervous colors. We remember. Though I still don't understand how you defeated our most advanced systems. Frank smiled slightly. Humans are good at solving problems. It's what we do. A thought occurred to Frank. Before I go, I have one question. Why did you choose me? Out of all humans, why pick a security guard from Montana? The 3 aliens looked at each other. Finally, Kest answered. Our selection was random within certain parameters. We wanted someone physically fit, but not in a position of power or importance. Frank laughed. So you wanted someone nobody would miss right away, but you accidentally grabbed an ex-Special Forces soldier with advanced training in survival, combat, and resistance to interrogation. The alien skin colors paled in unison as they finally understood their mistake. That was unfortunate for us, Blip admitted. But fortunate for our future relations with Earth, Kest added quickly. You have taught us much about your species. Frank checked the small alien device in his pocket, his proof that this had all really happened. What should I tell my bosses about where I've been? Vers approached with a small handheld tool. This will not be necessary. When you return, only 5 Earth minutes will have passed since your abduction. No one will know you were gone. Frank raised his eyebrows. Time manipulation. Space-time coordination, Blip corrected. A simple matter of aligning dimensional parameters. Frank shook his head. Nothing simple about it. Your technology is impressive, even if your judgment about which species to kidnap needs work. The return chamber began to hum as the aliens prepared the transport. A circular platform in the center glowed with soft blue light. "Step onto the platform when ready," Kist instructed. Frank moved to the center but paused before stepping onto the platform. He turned to face the three aliens. "You know," he said, "if you had just asked, I might have volunteered for your show. Many humans would welcome the adventure." The aliens looked genuinely surprised. "Asked," Vers repeated, as if the concept had never occurred to him. "Voluntary participation," Blip said, his skin showing fascination patterns. Kist's colors shifted thoughtfully. An interesting concept for future consideration. Frank stepped onto the platform. "Something to think about. Next time, try asking first." The chamber filled with light. The last thing Frank saw was the three aliens watching him, their skin patterns showing what he had learned to recognize as deep thought. In a flash, Frank found himself standing exactly where he had been 5 days ago, or rather, 5 minutes ago according to Earth time. The research facility looked unchanged. His flashlight was still in his hand. The night was still quiet. Frank looked up at the stars, wondering if the alien ship was still up there or already far away. He touched the small alien device in his pocket, his only proof that it had all really happened. His radio crackled to life. "Frank, you there? Thought I lost you for a minute." "I'm here, Joe," Frank replied. "Just saw something strange, but it's gone now." "Probably just the northern lights," Joe said. "Nothing exciting ever happens out here." Frank smiled to himself. "Yeah," he said, "just another quiet night." As he continued his patrol, Frank wondered if Earth would ever be ready to know about the wider universe. The aliens certainly hadn't been ready for Earth, or at least not for one particular human. Either way, Frank was pretty sure they wouldn't be coming back for entertainment anytime soon. Some lessons are learned the hard way, even for advanced alien civilizations. Next time they might think twice before kidnapping a human for fun.